Hey y'all, it's Beth. Welcome back to my channel. We are going to recap my reading for October 2024. Talk about what I read, talk about what we're going to read for November, and let's just recap the Goose Girl really quickly. I guess this is the only time I've ever read the Goose Girl. It's definitely one of the darker of the Grimm's fairy tales. I mean, they have a lot of them that are pretty dark. I chose the Goose Girl because I planned to read A Sorceress Comes to Call, which I did read here by T. Kingfisher, which is a retelling of the Goose Girl, but it also popped up in another one of the books that I read this month, and I wasn't expecting that. So in the Goose Girl, this mom gets her daughter ready to go marry a prince, ties it all up with a bow, sends her off on her favorite horse, Falada, and with a maid, and the maid hijacks the whole situation and takes the girl's place, relegates her to a servant taking care of geese, and she goes off to the palace to marry the prince. In good old everybody learns their lesson fashion, eventually she does get her comeuppance. The prince becomes suspicious, and eventually he finds the right woman that he was supposed to marry, and there are repercussions for the maid, but it is kind of dark. What I wrote down here was dangers of misplaced trust. Carefully choose your confidants, because that maid wasn't worth her salt. The power of kindness, because our Goose Girl never loses her kindness. Justice is inevitable, as it always is, or always seems to be in a Grimm fairy tale. There's strength in adversity, because again, she, keeps up her resilience. I also wrote resilience. Friendship in the oddest of spaces, like her friendship with the horse Falada. And the horse, I'm just going to say, does not come to a happy end. Like I said, it can be pretty dark. I'd read it for the first time, and I don't know, can I say that I enjoyed it? Not really. It was okay. It was fine. There are others that we have read this year that I liked less. Okay, what else did I read? So I came into the month reading Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Stephen King's fairy tale follows 17-year-old Charlie Reed, an ordinary high schooler whose life takes a dark and fantastical turn when he inherits a strange legacy. Uncovering a portal to a world besieged by sinister forces, Charlie finds himself drawn into a battle between good and evil with stakes that stretch across both worlds. And this is the other novel that the Goose Girl pops up in. And I wasn't expecting that. And I think it's actually a little bit more, shall we say, faithful than A Sorceress Comes to Call. I don't know. Two very different takes. And yet I liked them both. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, totally broadsided me. I wasn't expecting it at all. This is my first Stephen King. First fiction Stephen King. I've read On Writing, his book about the writing process, multiple times. But I hadn't picked up any of his other fiction because I'm not a horror fan. And I have watched some adaptations from here, there, wherever. I was exposed to the old version of Salem's Lot, not the new one, but the old Salem's Lot at way too young an age because my brother rented it and thought he was getting a completely different movie than we got. And I was like 6 years old when I saw that movie for the first time. And I am actually a really big fan of the 90s mid-series of The Stand. I really enjoyed that. But I've never really been drawn to reading any of Stephen King. I'm not going to say never, but the odds are very low that I'm ever going to pick up it or Pet Sematary or any of those books. It's probably not going to happen. I read this one because obviously it's titled Fairy Tale. I bought it when it came out. It was the first Stephen King fiction book that I'd ever bought. Looking at this image, I really expected there to be a dragon, and there's not a dragon. Sad. Where is my dragon? Other than that, I can, I guess, now see the appeal of why he's such a popular author. Because if his character work is as strong in every one of his novels as it is in Fairy Tale, I mean, he is verbose, y'all. There are so many words in this novel. It's 600 pages. It could have done with some editing for sure somewhere somehow. And yet, our character, Charlie, our main character, you know him inside, outside, backwards, and forward. You know what motivates him. You know what makes him feel empowered. You know what makes him worried. I mean, we know this kid so well. And we know his dog and her quirks and her personality and Charlie's dad. And I mean, you really do get an in-depth, fully rounded character. It's a book titled Fairy Tale, and it probably takes 40% of the book before anything distinctly fairy tale-esque begins to occur. I was like, man, we're getting to know this kid, and I still don't know where the fairy tale is. So I gave it 4 stars because it's just so wordy. But I wasn't expecting that kind of character work, and I guess, like I said, now I understand why Stephen King is as popular as he is. Don't necessarily want to read this because it'll give some things away, but we're going to go ahead and move on. So after Fairy Tale, I was feeling my Halloween oats, and I reread Dracula. In Dracula by Bram Stoker, young solicitor Jonathan Harker travels to Transylvania to assist the enigmatic Count Dracula with a real estate purchase, only to discover horrifying truths about his client. Meanwhile, strange events unfold in England. A ghostly ship crashes ashore, a woman finds mysterious bite marks on her neck, and an asylum patient foresees the arrival of his master. And that's all I'm going to give y'all, because if you've not read Dracula, first of all, you should. First of all, you should read it. And second of all, I'll give things away, And I know that Dracula is so prevalent in pop culture that you probably think you know Dracula, and yet you probably don't know Dracula. And yet, as you go through it, there's going to be so many cliches of vampirism, and they all started here. You're going to find out, the stake through the heart and all of that sort of thing. Starts in Dracula. It is not without its faults. So I haven't read it in probably 8 or 10 years. But I've read it multiple times in my life. I read it for the first time at the age of 20. I was in college. I did not have to read it for school. So I read it separately as somebody majoring in English literature. It just wasn't in my curriculum. So again, I did read it separately. It's written in journal entries. And one of the critiques that I see all of the time is that the pacing is off. It's repetitive. Well, yeah. Because you're getting journal entries from multiple characters, from multiple different perspectives of the same event. So there is going to be some overlap. There is going to be some repetition, but I don't think it's excessive. I think it's one of those things that you have to see this particular event from at least 2 of our characters' perspective in order to form a fully rounded perspective. You need to see Mina Harker, who is Jonathan Harker's wife. You need to see her perspective as well as Dr. Van Helsing. Or you need to see Jonathan's perspective plus, this other character. And I do have, I thought I had a physical copy. I can't find it. The most plausible reason for me not being able to find it is that someone said to me, "Oh, I've never read Dracula," and I just gave it to them and forgot. I tend to be a book dealer. I never ask for my books back. I just give them away, and then I discover later that I no longer have it. So I now need to go find myself a copy of Dracula because I love it so much. So like I said, it's got some misogyny in it. It was written in 1897, y'all. The funny thing about it is that Bram Stoker goes above and beyond to make Mina Harker a radically intelligent and capable woman. And he goes above and beyond to make sure the other male characters recognize that Mina Harker is a wildly intelligent and capable woman. and she solves some mysteries, or she gives them a perspective that they didn't think of it from that angle, and they're like, oh my god, of course, Mina, you're so smart. And then a moment comes when the danger cometh forth, and they're all like, oh, she can't come with us because she's a woman. I'm like, what the fuck? The older I get, the more misogyny kind of glares out at me. The funny thing is, though, is that Mina's absence from them going off to be the big strong men is a catalyst for the back third of the novel. Something happens that, the back third of the novel wouldn't exist if Mina had gone with them. Because if Mina had gone with them, first of all, she would have solved some things. And second of all, she would have been with them, so she would have been safer than being left alone. And, things wouldn't have kicked off, like I said, the back half of the novel. So it kind of has to take place, this moment of, we have to be the big strong men and Mina can't come. I just, I don't know. It bugged me a little bit more than I remember it doing historically, but I still gave it 5 stars. I love Dracula. I love Dracula way more than Frankenstein. I like Frankenstein. I recognize Frankenstein's place in history in terms of science fiction and all of that, but I don't love it like I love Dracula. I love Dracula. I just, he is the OG vampire for a reason. So there we go. Dracula. And then I did finally move on to A Sorceress Comes to Call. In A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, Cordelia lives under the control of her powerful, sinister mother, whose magic and cruelty isolate Cordelia from the world. When a suspicious death forces them to flee to a remote manor, Cordelia's mother begins to manipulate the kindly squire and his sharp-witted sister Hester. Determined to protect her brother and free Cordelia, Hester confronts dark forbidden magic in this haunting retelling of the Goose Girl. And there are elements of it. Cordelia does have a horse named Falada. There's a wildly different relationship there than in the Goose Girl, or even than in Fairy Tale. So different spins on it all the way around. So the book is told from 2 perspectives. It's told from the perspective of Cordelia, this young girl whose mother is a sorceress. That's, it's in the title, in the first page or 2. So it's not a giveaway. And Hester, who's probably, we don't get an age on Hester. She's probably 55-ish, 56. Makes herself sound so much older than she actually is. Because again, in that time period, somebody at the age of 50 would be perceived as ridiculously old. I'm not ever going to say that because I am 50 now. So. But she has knee problems. She doesn't like to climb the stairs in the house anymore. But she is a spinster by choice. She didn't want to get married and give away her freedom to a man. And she has these 2 girlfriends who are also unconventional. One of them is a card shark, and the other one is this woman that's described as both very plain and also someone that nobody can take their eyes off of. And so there's another character in the book that thinks that there's got to be some sort of charm or glamour on this very plain woman for everyone to be giving her so much attention. And it really just comes down to the way she dresses and how confident she is. It's all about her air and nothing about, a glamour or that sort of thing. But these, I'm going to call them the old biddies. I just don't think they're old at all. They're hysterical. For a book that's very dark, there's a lot of comedic scenes in it. There's a lot of fun. And Hester is one of my favorite characters of the year. Now, there's another book I read in here who also has one of my favorite characters of the year. Whether it's one of my favorite books or not, I don't know. But Hester as a character, I just adore her. And she's just phenomenal. And she's still a woman of her time. And there's some of the things that are going on in the book that she has a little bit of a difficult time wrapping her brain around them. And then when she does wrap her brain around it, she is like, oh, hell no. And my favorite thing, and again, it's not really a spoiler, because you know the sorceress is coming. So the sorceress, is Cordelia's mother, and they come to stay with this squire and his sister Hester. And the minute Hester meets her, she says basically like doom has come to call, and she calls her doom. she doesn't know what's wrong with her. She can't pinpoint exactly what it is yet, but she has a feeling about her, and she just blatantly calls her doom all the way through the book. And it's one of my favorite things ever. And then, of course, Cordelia goes from being a very young 15 or 16. She's got the sentimentality of like a 12-year-old because she's been so sheltered by her mother. So she goes through a big character arc of being very young and naive, and then sort of coming of age under Hester's tutelage. Obviously, Hester teaches her way more than her mother's ever taught her, and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I very much enjoyed it. There are trigger warnings. There's physical abuse, mental abuse, body horror, murder, and even more than that. So it is much darker than I thought it was going to be, and yet I still gave it 5 stars. I don't know if T. Kingfisher can do wrong in my eyes, guys. I don't know. We're going to find out, because again, I wanted to read What Feasts at Night, the sequel to What Moves the Dead, this month. I didn't get around to it. I also have Thornhedge and A House with Good Bones that I haven't read yet, but I've bought them because T. Kingfisher's getting to be an auto buy for me. She's just clearly scratching an itch for me right now and what I want to be reading. So we'll see if I read any of those others before we get to the end of the year. And then my reading for spooky season got derailed. And it got derailed because my library holds started coming in at a ridiculous pace that were not supposed to come in for, it was 6 weeks on one, and it was like 12 weeks on another, and just boom, 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 these library holds started coming in, and I had gone ahead and put them on hold because I didn't expect to have the hold come in until late November or early December, and it wasn't going to get in the way of my spooky season reading, and I was very, very wrong. So the first one of those is Calibans War. Calibans War by James S.A. Corey plunges the solar system into chaos as a Martian Marine witnesses her team decimated by a terrifying super soldier, sparking tensions between Mars and Earth. A high-ranking politician races to keep fragile peace intact. Amid the turmoil, James Holden, our hero from the first book in the Expanse series, and his crew take on a desperate mission to find a missing child, only to discover a threat that could alter humanity's fate across the stars. So I do have a physical copy of Calibans War. All of the Expanse books are chonkers. They're all massive. And I did Leviathan's Wake on audiobook because I bought books 2, 3, and 4 at a used bookstore for next to nothing. And they were like $2 a piece. But I didn't have book 1. And then I was enjoying book 1 so much that I found it for like $12 and ordered it. So I now have 1, 2, 3, and 4 in physical copy. And because I had enjoyed the narrator from book 1, I had gone ahead and put in the library hold for Calibans War, again, thinking it wasn't going to come in, and then it came in. I did a hybrid version. I really do love the audiobooks, though. And it is a sequel. There's not much else I can tell you other than this has the other character who is my favorite, and it is the politician who's trying to keep peace across the stars. Her name is Christian Avasarala. She's Indian. She is sassy. Sometimes she just wants to get home to her husband, and yet she has to do all of this crazy shit to keep the universe and humanity from killing one another across the stars. She's extremely direct, and she has a very colorful vocabulary. There's just about no sentence that comes out of her mouth that is not laced with profanity. And it made me so happy. Like, I just love her so much. And she might be a little bit older than Hester and Sorceress Comes to Call. Maybe she's 60. I mean, she's an older politician. She's been in the game a long time. And she knows more than anyone how all the pieces move and how certain pieces react to other pieces, and she is just so in tune with it, and she does some pretty radical things to try to keep peace in the galaxy during Calibans War. And I would probably listen to this book again just because she's in it. And I'm gonna say, like, I gave it 5 stars. I gave Leviathan Wakes 5 stars, but this one has edged it out, this second book. And maybe it's because we spent so much time in the first book learning our characters. You know, you got to have that exposition in a first book. But it still had its own plot. It had its own things that needed to be resolved. It could have been a standalone, but it did set up things for, obviously, what's going to be a 9-book series. But I enjoyed Calibans War just a hair more. I just really, really loved it. So yeah. That's all I'm going to say about that. And then while I was reading Calibans War, another library hold came through that wasn't supposed to come through. And I had to start reading Calibans War everywhere. I had it on the audiobook when I was in the shower while I was putting my makeup on in the morning. I typically read at night before I go to bed for an hour or an hour and a half. So I was doing it then. I had it on when I was in the car. I had the book on like everywhere I had it on in the kitchen when I was making dinner. I had it on everywhere trying to catch up so that I could get to the next book that had come in on my library holds. And that was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. The Blade Itself weaves the lives of 3 flawed and dangerous men. Logan Ninefingers, a barbarian scraping by on dwindling luck. Luthar, a vain noble with little ambition beyond cards and fencing. And Inquisitor Glokta, a crippled torturer whose hatred of everyone keeps him ruthlessly loyal to the Union. When Baez, a mysterious wizard, enters their lives, the trio is pulled into a brutal web of conspiracy, war, and bloodshed where heroism and villainy often blur beyond recognition. I have had this book and the other 2 books in this trilogy, the First Law trilogy, for years. Absolute years. I knew I would like them, but I've had like 4 false starts with this book. I would start it, and then even though I was enjoying it, I would put it down. And then I would start it, and even though I was enjoying it, I would put it down. Like, I don't know what the dysfunction was. And so I decided to try it on audio to see if it was any better. And that's when the audiobook came through from the library. Now, what I can say is that I don't know that I love the audiobook on this one. So I was doing a little bit more of the hybrid reading, but it did get me kickstarted to get me through the book. Finally, I have finished it. I enjoyed it. I didn't give it 5 stars. I got a little happy-dappy with the stencil, so I need to clean up one of these. Here, we'll just go ahead and do this. And I'll stencil an outline over that later. I can say that I adore Joe Abercrombie's grimdark writing. It is a grimdark fantasy, and I love it. I love his style. I love the way he writes. But this book definitively feels like a setup. It feels like the first in a series. There are things that need to be resolved in it, but they're not really, they don't feel super risky or high stakes or that sort of thing. There's a little bit of it in there. It's the antithesis of Leviathan Wakes from The Expanse, where, like I said, it could have been a standalone, and I loved every minute of it. It was powerful. You still met all of your characters. You got all the exposition in. The difference here is that this one just feels like a whole lot of exposition. Like, it mentions there's the 3 characters. So you've got Logan, you've got Luthar, you've got Glokta. And you're hearing this one's tale, and you're hearing this one's tale, and you're hearing this one's tale. And eventually they start to get closer and closer and closer to one another. one of them, I don't want to give up too much, one of them meets up with this mysterious wizard before the other two, and so then two of what is clearly becoming a fellowship have come together, and then other things have to happen, and then another person gets pulled into said fellowship, and then other things have to happen, and another person gets pulled into said fellowship, and they're about to go off on a quest. And it's just very clear that that's what's happening. And I took off a star for that because it was so obvious. But his writing is so good. And I liked his character so much that I kept it at a 4-star. And that's just one of those examples of a book not being perfect and you still loving it anyway. And I'm hoping that all of those issues are resolved for books 2 and 3. And then obviously that has become a whole realm unto itself now. There are standalones, there's other trilogies, there's other books. It's a whole situation. So while I'm focusing on the first trilogy at this point, this world has continued to expand. Yeah, I'm assuming that if people continue to read it, that those issues were resolved in the first book. Okay, let's do November. And this is the part where I admit that I've already filmed this video once and I didn't turn on the mic. And sometimes it happens. So I've already set up for November because I thought the mic was on and the mic wasn't on. And now my throat hurts because I've had to repeat all of this twice. I've said it multiple times before. We don't do perfection here. And we are going to read Little Red Riding Hood for November. We're back to one of the more popular of the Grimm's fairy tales. So Goose Girl being a little more abstract, and yet it showed up in 2 of my reads for the year, one of them on purpose, and Sorceress Comes to Call. I had no idea it was going to pop up in fairy tale. And then while I was reading The Blade itself, the library hold for the 3rd in the Expanse series came through. So I'm currently reading Abaddon's Gate, and I don't have any other library holds waiting out there. I was like, I went to check. I was like, do I have any other that I think are coming in 12 weeks that might show up in 1 week? Or no, so I'm going to take a break on requesting my library holds unless they're things that are instantly available, because there's some other things that I need to read, and I'm not enjoying the pace at which I felt pressured to then, oh my gosh, you've got this one on hold now, so you have to finish this one really quickly, and then finish that one and started the next one, and then another hold came in, and it was like, and you know, the library holds are for, on the Libby app, are for what, 12 days? 10 days? Something like that. So to get through a 600-page book on audio in that amount of time, you really got to be pushing it, I think. Well, unless you're one of those people that just walks around with an audiobook on, and we've talked before about how I can't do that. I have to be able to give it my full attention. So, yeah. So I'm currently reading Abaddon's Gate from the Expanse series. We're going to read Little Red Riding Hood. I have very few pages. I have made the decision that I'm so close to the end of the year that I will not move into a second notebook, but I've made the decision to give myself permission in 2025 to take up as much space as I need and move into a second notebook. And the funny thing is if you go back and watch the setup for this reading journal, I said in that setup that if I needed to move into a second notebook, it was a-okay. And then I haven't taken my own advice. But we're going to try to go ahead and squish it in, but then we're going to give ourselves the license in 2025 to just take up as much space as we need. And if we need to move into a second notebook, we're going to move into a second notebook. So I have at the front, I've added Little Red Riding Hood to our card. I did find out something interesting about Storygraph this week. I kept looking at it and my numbers were off. My reading numbers were off. Well, Storygraph, and that's what you see, these little dots. I was doing an inventory of what I had put on there or not put on there. See, all the way down, I was checking my books. And I didn't realize, and it is now a pet peeve of mine, that when you mark a book as DNF or do not finish on Storygraph, it doesn't count in your read count. And I don't like that. Now, I understand there's people that like it the other way around. There's other people who don't want their DNFs to show up in their read count. And I wish there was a way that you could change your settings personally for that one thing to take place, because I double checked it on Goodreads. And if you mark a book as, read and then DNF, it counts. It counts in your book total. It counts in your Goodreads goal total. And I kept thinking I was way behind. I'm not way behind. I am only 2 books shy of my goal. Ta-da. Now, I could read a book in November and a book in December. I think we all know I'm going to read more than 1 book in November and 1 book in December. I added Dracula to my classics. So I have 1 classic left, and I have 1 memoir left. And I've been thinking about reading the 3rd Gilmore Girl as my memoir. So, I don't know, TBD. We'll see if I do that, see if I want to buy it, because I certainly don't have it. Or if maybe the library has it. And then, so we're almost to my 54 in 2024. And, I don't have any space down here, so I'll figure something out to count however many books I read. I have a solution for that for 2025. And then my backlist, like I said, I've already hit 10, so we've checked it off, that my goal was to at least read 10 of these books. And I've read more than that now, because I've added Blade Itself to this, I've added Fairy Tale to this. So yeah, we're well over, I'm at 12 or 13 now, I think. For my series, I've added First Law. I didn't black this out yet because of that whole Joe Abercrombie's entire world situation, kind of like the Realm of the Elderlings with Robin Hobb, or the Cosmere with Brandon Sanderson. It's a whole situation. And I do not yet know how I want to handle that. I do have more series under here if you are new to my channel, so this is not the only series that I'm in the middle of. We have others as well. And I think that's the only update. I don't think I've added anything else. I haven't changed anything else in here. The only other thing that I'm thinking about is that I might replace this little book cover for Leviathan Wakes with the second of the series for Calibans War, because it just inched it out as my favorite so far. I'm enjoying Abaddon's Gate, but I don't think it'll beat Calibans War. I don't think it'll, whatever. And then I only have 3 more that I can pick as favorites to start then trying to pick my favorite book of the year. My ratings. Yeah. And then there's January. So nothing else to add. Let's jump back here to November. If you want to read Little Red Riding Hood along with us, Grimm's Fairy Tales are in the public domain. It'll be linked down below if you want to read it online. We'd love to have you join us. Tell me in the comments if you read the Goose Girl. What did you think about it? If you've read any of the other Goose Girl adjacent novels, if you've read Stephen King's Fairy Tale, or if you've read Sorceress Comes to Call, let's have a conversation about that and the Goose Girl as well. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.